Hey there! Welcome to the CMMC Compliance Guide Podcast. I'm Austin.
And I'm Brooke.
From Justice IT. We're here to help businesses like yours navigate CMMC and NIST 800-171 compliance. We're hired guns getting companies fast-tracked to compliance, but today we're here to give you all the secrets for free. So if you want to tackle it yourself, you're equipped to do so. Let's dive into today's episode and keep your business on track. Alright, so today's episode is a little bit of a soapbox for me. So I apologize to everyone.
Great. Austin on a soapbox.
Yeah. And sorry to drag you into this. So I was on a call yesterday and I get this a lot. You know, I talk to a lot of our customers, a lot of our prospective customers, yada yada. And what we hear a lot is that the CMMC ask, especially for the SMBs, is unreasonable, and for things like it's gonna just collapse in on itself, and there's no way this is gonna happen. So you hear the variations of I'm just gonna wait, or it's not gonna happen, so I'm just gonna act as if it just implodes, right? And so, which I get. I mean, it's a fair criticism.
It is, and I've heard that from quite a few people too.
Right. So
Those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a large ask. So that is what today's episode is about. Is the CMMC mandate a digital war, not on SMBs, but like in fighting back against those that are stealing our nation's war intellectual property?
Although some SMBs might think it's a war on them, but that is good clarification. Thank you.
Might have heard that from some of them.
We might have.
Right. So is the CMMC mandate a digital war, or is it an unreasonable ask for SMBs in the DoD supply chain? So that is today's episode. The first thing that we're going to hit on, I'm just going to take, because I'm still blabbing along.
Yes, you are, but go right ahead.
So it is my soapbox after all.
Right.
Yeah. Brooke, from a technical standpoint, do you think the current CMMC framework is realistic for SMBs to implement? Or are there some adjustments that could make it more achievable?
Well, that's a good question. So, is it achievable? Yes, it is. Is it expensive? Yes, it is. They have made some really good progress in the 32 CFR final rule. Some things that we're really worried about. The way they treated, the blanket statements and everything with ESPs, external service providers, which include us as a managed service provider, an IT provider, or a registered practicing organization. Anyway, affected us. And in a big way, and although we're ready for it, it also affected the services we use, and it affected them, and so it effectively shrunk the marketplace down to only a few enterprise providers, which, as everyone knows, for SMB, enterprise didn't really fit well because it's a high license count and expensive. So that's just the one thing. But there are several things in the 32 CFR final rule that they've made some exceptions, made some things easier to work with, made some some carve outs. I can't think of the right word, but they've made it easier to work with and understandable. They've not given a lot of ground as far as making sure that you do meet all those controls, but they've given us something to work with. For instance, the whole FIPS encryption thing.
Yeah.
If you've got a piece of machinery or a computer that's tied to a piece of machinery that has to have access, has to use CUI because it makes parts. It's connected to the network, or whether it's not connected to the network. If it's not connected to the network, you have to use a USB, for instance, to do the whole sneaker net thing. Anyway, but they've made some exceptions with enduring exceptions. And an operational POAM, stuff like that. But to not stay too long on my soapbox, you asked the question: is it overbearing, basically? And it is expensive. I'm not going to lie. It is hard and tough. That's true. But it is definitely doable. What I will say is, like like a lot of things, it doesn't scale well for the really small shops. So, you're for like 5 people, 10 people, in a manufacturing shop, for instance. It's going to be, however you want to phrase it, more expensive per capita, more expensive per dollar of revenue for them than it is a large organization. But it is doable. You just have to be able to budget for it. They know that this is going to cost money. I know there are a lot of people out there that do work not based on actual contracts from the government, but they do stuff as a sub to a prime contractor, and they don't even have, they get POs, they don't really have an actual contract that they get that's, a 1-year contract with 4 option years. They don't get that, And so that kind of work, I have no doubt will change, and especially when everybody has to be certified. The people that have been faking it and checking boxes off aren't going to be able to do that. And those are the people that are able to offer the services at lower cost because they're not doing everything they should be. So hang in there, it'll work out, it'll get there. So it's tough, but it can be done.
Mm.
Is the bottom line. I guess I could have just said that to begin with and been done with it, but there's my part.
Yeah, be quiet. This is my soapbox, not yours. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, that's the best way to sum it up. It's tough, but it can be done.
Yes.
So that, I think, kind of segues into what my actual soapbox is, and it's tough, but it can be done, and the government knows that, right? And they know that they're asking you to step up the game, and if you view it like me, they're fine with some collateral damage, and that may be just like
they're not going to say that.
Yeah, well, I'm saying it. Allegedly, I'm saying it. Yeah. So, and so here's why I'm saying that. I'm not trying to be salacious or anything else, but my perspective is that the government, the DoD, is fighting a war through regulation and compliance, because much like you saw in, I think, the 90s and early 2000s, a lot of our manufacturing went to China, and this is just an example, but it is just fact. A lot of our manufacturing,
China has a bunch of our manufacturing.
yeah, went to so they made it very attractive for our manufacturing companies. There's other aspects there to come to China, and then they created a lot of joint ventures, a lot of companies, and then they learned some of our companies, their manufacturing processes, and then got the IP, and then suddenly you have them creating competitors, even sometimes where they're just changing one letter. Chevy is now, they have a Cherry, and then they have the Chevy Spark that is, I forget what they named the Chevy Spark, but now they're selling it. And so, point is that we've gone through this process of giving away a lot of our IP and a lot of our manufacturing.
Absolutely.
And now it's now the other nation states, and China's just an example. This is why the DoD is doing this. You have North Korea, you have Russia, you have China, and everybody else using their cyber warfare to get into the Lockheeds, the Parker Hannifins, Raytheons, and then they have $1 billion cybersecurity budgets or whatever, and so they found out it was easier to go further down the supply chain and get into these smaller companies that have pieces of the puzzle of classified information, and that's what controlled unclassified information is. It's a piece of classified information. So it's a derivative of it, basically, right? So anyway, my point with this is that in the Department of Defense views, whether they say it or not, I think that they are fighting a war through regulatory compliance because they want to keep all of the money we spend, all of our weapon systems guarded. And if you view it as if they're fighting a digital war against other nation states from stealing our intellectual property, and you understand that that is their goal and their game plan, then you suddenly understand that they don't put as much stock into the economics of it and whether or not it's as achievable for these smaller SMBs or not. So I mean, they're doing some things to make it a little easier. But at the end of the day, I don't think they care as much about making sure that everybody stays in the supply chain. And so I think if you view it from that perspective, that they're just going to go forward with this regardless. I don't think it's a good idea necessarily to just gamble on the fact that this may just implode on itself. Because even if it does, I think they may keep going forward. And I'm willing to say that if I'm wrong in 3 or 4 years, then come get me and tell me I was wrong. But that's my opinion.
He'll buy you a steak if he's wrong, so
Yeah.
I'll just hit him up.
If I can afford it, then. But anyway, so that's my perspective, and I think you can see the reinforcement from some of the policy that they're taking. Like you have them, they're starting to talk a lot about the False Claims Act, and
Yes, they are.
putting people in prison, levying fines against them for saying that they were compliant and they're not. So my point is, they're telling you that this is serious. They're treating this as if it's serious. And if they're willing to put you in prison over it, maybe you should take them seriously. That's my thought. And that's my soapbox. I'll get off of it. But I want to tee up to you on my tirade there, what your opinion on the DoD's approach is and whether you agree with me or not.
Yeah, actually, absolutely. So I wish, and I think this is probably I know this is at least the second podcast we've done where I've said this, but I wish we had a picture back here of a few of the things that China's copied, Joint Strike Fighter, Humvee, and different things, because you can see, when you show our Joint Strike Fighter and the Chinese J something anyway, if you show those side by sides, my gosh, they look almost identical, for some strange reason. And so this whole thing is to prevent that, right? Because they're stealing all this. And so the reason the United States has a military advantage in the world is because of our technology, and you can name all sorts of other things, but one of the big things is technology. And so we've been ahead of that technological curve. We've been ahead of that and been able to create quicker and faster than other nations, especially our adversaries around the world. We have a good economy to base that off of. We've got...
We're still one of the largest.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the American experiment has worked. It's we've got all that going for us. So, and that's why we've been able to, you can disagree with some of that, I'm sure. But point is, we've got a good economy.
And we're just sharing opinions here.
Yeah. and so with that good economy, we've been able to pay for staying ahead of the technological curve. And it's not like China doesn't have smart people. It's not like Russia doesn't have smart people. They do. They have some very smart people. They have some very good at I'll just say cybersecurity, cyber warfare, they're very good at all that. So, but we're no slouches. We've got a bunch of smart people, and we've got money to back it up. And unfortunately, you have to have that. You have to have some resources to back that up. So, but what China has been able to do, to your point, they've been able to leapfrog decades of R&D, research and development. They've been able to leapfrog billions or trillions of dollars spent on that R&D and trial and error. Well, I guess that's what R&D is. But anyway, been able to leapfrog decades of R&D and trillions of dollars that they didn't have to spend. They just come and break into somebody's computer and steal something, And so, as you said, it's not like Lockheed and all them haven't had any cybersecurity incidents. They have, but they don't get the bulk of their information from there necessarily. It's a lot easier to break into a 20-person machine shop that's machining some little widget or some widgets for the F-35 or whatever it may be. And it's a lot easier to break in there, send them a email that they click on, and suddenly there's a Trojan on their computer, and they realize what they have, and then they exfil it, right? And then they just put puzzle pieces together. That's how they get the Joint Strike Fighter. I'm like I have pictures back here to show you, but that's how they get those. They've stolen all that stuff. So, and it really, when you get down to it, that's what gives us our technological advantage, but it also is what protects our warfighters. We don't have to go out there and fight with sticks and stones and blunt objects and sharp blades. We can. We have some more technological advances that we can use and use a smaller fighting force, a smarter fighting force, and so this helps our warfighter. So that's what this whole effort is to protect our warfighter and to protect our advantage technologically. So that's what it's all about. It's all about that warfare, like you were talking about, and the way they address it. We're a free country, right? And so the way they address it is by policy. It's not like the government can come and just say, you've got to do this. They were like, well, if you want to do business with us, this is what you have to do, and we don't want to have a revolt against this completely. And so, because they do need all the SMBs, they do need all those companies making parts and doing things for them, or else they just couldn't survive.
Yeah, otherwise they would have just mandated it and said,
this is the way it's going to be. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, so
or they would have provided the security themselves. So they can't do that. So it's done through policy like this, and it's taken a long time to come to fruition. But it's a freight train, and it's coming now. So it is not stopping.
If you sit on those town halls, or if you talk to people, or you talk to assessors, there's not a lot of give and take. It's like the standards have been out for a while. They are what they are. We're going to double down on them. We're not going to make them less stringent.
Yes.
It's kind of the theme or feeling you get from them. But so to get back to the reason that the DoD is doing this, trying to protect our nation's IP and
IP would be intellectual property, not
Yeah.
TCP/IP. Just in case there's any geeks like us.
I don't
watching,
think
so.
there are.
Well, there may not. Actually, now that I say that, you're probably right.
Well, maybe. I don't know. It is a compliance podcast, so we don't know. Let us know in the comments. So all that intellectual property, government's goal is to protect it. Do you feel like the CMMC compliance regulations, standards, technical safeguards, whatever you want to call it, do the job of keeping other nation states out? Like, is there at least some silver lining here that maybe we can feel better that we're a little more protected?
I've always liked the NIST 800-171 compared to other compliance regimes. I've always liked this one. It's pretty prescriptive. Doesn't tell you exactly what you have to do, but it lays out that you've got to do these things. And like you can say you meet ISO 27001, but you kind of get to build it yourself. And I know we won't get into a big discussion about that, but this one is you have to follow these controls. You have to authorize people. You have to have a list of those people. You have to use FIPS encryption for CUI. So it's very prescriptive in that manner. It doesn't say how you have to do that necessarily, but it says you have to do those things. So, but it covers the bases. And for us as an IT provider, it has all the things that we would want somebody to have. All of our clients, we wish they would have all these solutions in place to meet these controls, right? But as again, we're a free country, and not all our businesses want to pay for that. So,
Yeah.
but it's a very good compliance regime, and I think it does a good job of keeping the bad guys out.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it is if you actually do what you say you're doing. And I will say there are a few things you have to review logs, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're gonna, I have no idea how this would pass an assessor, but if you say, yeah, we have all the logs and we have them right here, and we get alerts. And we look over those alerts, 10,000 alerts or whatever, and is that really doable? Well, probably not. You really have to have some service that goes through those alerts, narrows them down, correlates them, does whatever, and I know I'm kind of vague on that one, but some people just want to say they gather the logs and they look through them. That really doesn't fly, and it doesn't work. So technically, you are meeting the control. Again, I don't know how an assessor would assess that, but I have a feeling. So, but you have to have some service in place to help you, because there are thousands and thousands and tens of thousands, and depending on how big you are, millions of log entries a day. So
It's got to pass the assessor's sniff test.
it does have to
see whether it's BS or not, right?
So,
Yeah.
so to go along with it, you do have to make sure you're doing things correctly, but it's pretty prescriptive, and if you follow things with an open mind and address them like you think you should, then it'll be covered, and it keeps bad guys out.
So I think this is the typical vein of conversation. It's usually people question whether or not the CMMC will continue on, whether it's an unnecessary burden on the supply chain. And the next thing usually that people will go to is whether it's even worth it for them to stay in the business or not. And
It's a good question to ask yourself.
very reasonable.
Very reasonable
and
question.
very fair. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because at the end of the day, it is business. We're not warfighters, right? We're not soldiers, so we're not mandated to do this just because we have to. It's an option. It's a choice. If we want to be part of defense work, then this is the ask, right? It's part of part of the job. So you don't have to be a part of it. But if you want to, then you have to do this, is what the government's saying, right?
Yes.
So if you want to opt out, perfectly fine. And so people will say they aren't sure whether it's even the economic value is worth it. And I agree. And I say, at the end of the day, it's in the numbers. So you go to your P&L, you go to your sales summary by customer, and you go, who here is responsible for my DoD work, number of revenue from it, percentage, whatever. Does this amount justify that I invest? Because that's what it is. You're investing in cybersecurity and compliance to keep this revenue or get more of it. And if we assume that there's going to be some frictional change in the supply chain of people not doing it, then there's going to be some contract value or move from people that aren't being compliant to people that are. So I would assume you should be able to make more money. So if that equation of does my current revenue justify it and or the potential revenue I could get, then that's the equation or the formula you put together to decide whether it's worth it to stay in CMMC. And so, I've talked to people that have like 10-20% of the revenue from Aerospace or DoD, and they're like, I'm not sure if it's worth it. I'm like, yeah, that's a very reasonable question. And then I have people that have like 60% of the revenue from Aerospace or DoD, and I'm like, I don't know if you can replace that revenue in the next 3 years, but to me, I think I would invest. But I don't know what people's profit margins are. I don't know. So anyway, that's my take on whether it's justifiable to stay in defense work and invest in CMMC. I think it's a simple answer. What is your thought?
Well, you're right. It's just you look at your P&L and how much you can charge for your product, and if this is a worthwhile investment, but I mean, it's just really just as simple as that. You just have to figure out, it's going to be, it's going to start around, just to get certified, it's going to start around 100,000 at the low point, really higher than that, but it's going to start around 100,000 just to get certified every 3 years.
So break that $100,000 for us down. How much of that is assessor? How much of that is antivirus? How much, like, as broad as you can get? But
Oh no, that is just the certification assessment,
Yeah.
and that was before the final rule in the 48 CFR anyway, where they require 2 assessors per assessment. So that has raised the price a little bit. So really, it's more than 100,000. It's probably it's probably closer to 120,000, 110,000. I don't know, something like that. But that's a low bar. That's for the small shops. It's not for the big ones. And so that would be, see through PAO's time. That would be either a provider like us, or all the time you're going to spend internally doing it. It's also for any preparation you need to have specifically for the assessment. Okay, and that's just we'll just round off to 110,000. So 110,000. That's just for that. That's just for certification. It's once every 3 years. That does not count the cost of the services. So if you're an SMB and you need to hire a provider to come help you because you don't have the internal expertise, which I can tell you, it'll be a lot cheaper hiring an IT provider to come, or an IT provider that knows what they're doing. It'll be a lot cheaper to hire them to come help you out and do this than it will be to hire somebody internally to do it, because then they're more expensive, and then they have to go still buy all the solutions and all that kind of fun stuff. So, but again, that $120,000 does not include everything you have to put in place, and that could be, for recurring services to an IT provider like us, it could be 60,000 a year, it could be 75, it could be 100,000, depending on how big you are, depending on what kind of environment you have, and that's just ongoing. And then you also there will be some projects in there. Will your current environment work? There are likely changes that need to happen. So you're going to have 10, 20, 30, 40, $100,000 in projects you need to pay for. So, these are not small numbers. So if you've got a $500,000 book of business from a prime that you work on, and you make, I don't know, 15% profit, 20% profit, I have no clue, but figure out what profit you make on that, and is it worth the 120,000 plus the 60 to 100,000 services plus the projects you're going to have to put in place? Is it worth it? And for a book of business like that, it may not be. Or you got to use it as a marketing thing, which a lot of our clients are intending on. And I do have something else I'll mention that we talked about a little earlier. But a lot of our clients are intending on using this as marketing, saying, hey, look, we meet all the controls. We are now at 110 SPRS score, which means you meet all the controls. And we're in your system, we're green and we're good to go. That I'm not going to tell you that will definitely mean you get more contracts, but that should mean you get contracts quicker and earlier than anybody else that's behind the 8 ball. So because it's going to start meaning something at the end of this year, your SPRS score. So so the other thing I was going to tell you about is, I probably shouldn't name the.
Let's not name them.
I shouldn't name the prime. I'm definitely not going to name our client, but
I think that's a good story. I think I know what you're going to say. I was going to ask you to.
I won't name the prime. They're one of the primes that's a good word would be they're persnickety about all these controls. So I've gone back and forth with them on some of these controls before, and they're just persnickety about them, and really want to nail them down and be very specific. So, but I understand why. But I had a good conversation with their person that's in charge of compliance. She told me, really we want the subcontractor to be green in our system, and our CEO has this as a goal. We want to be in the best place possible to get all the contracts we can I guess those were not her words. This is all my paraphrasing. So we want to be as good in a good a position as possible to get contracts from the federal government. And so what that means is making sure that all of our subcontractors are in the best position possible. So they're really pushing their subcontractors to be green in their system, which means they have 110 on the SPRS score. So, this particular client had FIPS encryption left on some things that wasn't in across everything yet. So, but the final rule just came out too, and that gave us some breathing room. So, or some things we could do. So, but the anyway, they wanted them to be green, and they told them, we're just trying to get you in the best spot so you can get contracts easily, and we want to get all our as many of our subcontractors in that green area as we can, so we can be in a better spot. And I kind of that's just a repeat, but they're really pushing to get this done by the end of this year, or as early as possible. Right, and it's all understandable, and it's all. I mean, it was a really good conversation. I'm really glad I talked to her and understood that, because we hear that, we see it in forums, we're at the shows, and we talked at the conferences, CMMC conferences, and talk to people and hear this stuff, But that was the first time I've really had a really good conversation with one of these prime contractors that just laid it all out on the table. And basically, they're just trying to get in a really good position, and they want all their contractors to be there to get. It is ostensibly what they were saying without coming. And she said, "I can't really come right out." Just like I said a minute ago, I can't really come right out until you get more contracts, but you'll be in a really good position to get contracts. Yeah. So it's like, well, okay, that's what she's saying basically. Is if you're green, If you've got 110 on the SPRS, you'll be in a really good position to get contracts, and it'll be easy for us to hand you contracts.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I like that. It's it's funny how many things in business is never guaranteed.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And it's not guaranteed you'll get more contracts, but if you spend the time and money, and you're able to spend that time and money. To be fully compliant and there's, like we've said on other podcasts, there's a ton of documentation, an absolute ton of documentation that has to be in place. Ongoing documentation, then also proof, of that the controls are in place. That all has to be. You have to have all that documentation, and it's a lot. So if you have all that, then they're trying very hard, at least the primes are trying very hard to make sure they explain to the subs that, if you get in this green area, the 110, that you'll be in a really good position to get those contracts. So it can be worth it for you.
Okay. Well, now that we've kind of talked about all the conceptual ideas and all the things that aren't guaranteed but seem likely, I do like to close out all these episodes with some practical actionable steps. So, because at the end of the day, all we can do is just take the next, step forward, right? So, a question for you, and I've got my own opinions here, but I'm gonna let you take this one first. Is what are some practical steps today or a practical framework that an SMB, since that's who we're talking about in today's episode, that they can go from not compliant to compliant. All from whether it's a SPRS self-assessment or whatever. If they've taken no steps to get compliant, and today they listened to the episode and said, "Okay, I want to get compliant now." How would you advise them to do so?
So the first steps you want to do is understand what CUI. You need to understand how to spell CUI and what it means. And you want to understand FCI, so Federal Contract Information and Controlled Unclassified Information, because that's what all this is about. The big deal is about CUI, Controlled Unclassified Information. So you you need to know what that is. You need to know what information you have is CUI, okay? And it doesn't have to be, when you're first starting out and trying to figure this out, it doesn't have to be specifically which documents right now are CUI, but, you know, in general, what do I have that's CUI, you know? Is it spelled out on the contracts? Are the documents marked? Probably not. Or, you know, what is CUI, right? Mm-hmm. And so after you figure that out, then draw yourself out a data flow diagram. So how does that CUI come in? Where does it come from? How does it come in? Where does it go when it comes into my systems, right? And then you need to define your systems and understand what you have, because a lot of people with just the IT sprawl and growth that you have, and you know, you're like, oh, I forgot about we had an instance of E2 over here, and I forgot, you know, or you know, whatever. It might be hard to forget about that one, but you know, IT sprawl is a real thing, and you sometimes forget what all is where and how things are connected and all that. So,
scanner folder. It's a good example.
Yeah, scanner folder. You know, you scan those drawings in or something, or you whatever. So
never delete them, but they're open to the guest Wi-Fi or
right. You know. So you need to understand where that CUI comes into your systems, where it resides in your systems, if it traverses throughout your systems, where it goes, and then if it goes out from you, where does it go? You know, and how does it get there? So that's a data flow diagram. So understand your CUI, understand where your data flow. So draw a data flow diagram, and then with that, you can describe your environment really well, and your environment that's in scope, right? And so, so that leads you to scoping, right? So at that point, you can scope your environment and define it really well. And we had a podcast with Chris Silvers. Yep. We really appreciate it, Chris, if you're out there watching. But one of the things he said was that you've got to tell your scoping is telling a story, is selling your idea of your scope. And so you've got to do a sales job on your scope to the assessor. This is why we do this, and this is, you know, so you've got to sell your scoping. So it's not just not some broad idea, you know, with one statement or something. It's more detailed than that. So you got to scope your network after that. So understand CUI, understand the data flow, where it goes, scope your environment really good, and then once you do that, then you have it kind of laid out and can understand how you need to implement the 110 controls or 320 objectives. Okay, that's the in-depth hard part. Understandably, that and all the documentation you got to create and save and all that on the way. The next thing I would say, actually, you just asked about getting started, but the next thing I would say is that you get a really good GRC platform, and we've got one that we use, and it's specifically for CMMC. It works great. It's better than all the other GRC platforms out there that we've tried. We really like it.
I don't think there's a problem giving them a shout out.
No, it's Future Feed. Folks over there are great. They've done a wonderful job with Future Feed. So, you know, Mark Berman done a really good job.
We do use it. They're not paying us to say that.
No.
Yeah. Just our preference.
But that's a good idea. No, just kidding. But anyway, great product. It makes it, I won't say easy because there's really nothing about this that's easy, but it makes it.
Nothing about CMMC is easy.
It contains everything for you, so it's a really good product. So those things are the most important high-level things you can do to move forward with being compliant.
So I'd say, like everything you said, I'd say if you're, you know, we're coming from the skeptic SMB opinion here, which again I completely understand. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but if you are skeptical, but you do have or are looking for defense work, then I would start by pulling out your sales by customer summary, and then doing some quick barroom napkin math and go, okay, how much of my business is DoD or could be misconstrued as such, and then I'd go through my email and search ExoStar, SPRS or CMMC and see how many times I've been asked by my primes, my customers, about compliance. I'll see if I ever filled anything out. My point here is that I would go look at my risk profile, and if you're skeptical, I would go just see what the risk profile is, and then go Google about China, North Korea, Russia, CUI, and whether or not they're stealing this, and then you go look for yourself on the Google,
On the Google.
and see why the DoD is doing this. Then search for False Claims Act. What Chris brought up? Was it Missouri State?
There's Georgia Tech, I think,
yeah.
and Penn State.
Yeah, so go Google those cases.
And there's another university too, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Surely, with the information we're giving you here, you can find the DoD using the False Claims Act to prosecute those entities and others that have said they've been compliant, or maybe misconstrued that they were, and go convince yourself that this is actually important, and then make a decision whether it's something you're going to do or not. Because I'm not trying to necessarily convince you to go use our services or go get compliant. I'm not here, trying to champion for the DoD. We're just an implementer. We're here to do a job for our customers. What I'm trying to get you to do is not get caught in a bad situation. Mm-hmm. So whether that's in jail, whether that's at a sudden loss of revenue, and if it's something you don't want to do, then right now, start looking for other revenue sources. Go find new customers, because we're pretty sure, and the government's telling us that in the next 2 or 3 years, this is going to be the real deal. And you're going to feel the hurt if you're not ready. And that may not be jail time, but it sure could be the fact that you're no longer getting contracts. And you and me know hard times in business. Sometimes the hardest hurting thing is that when you're not growing and you're starting to wane off, and it seems like nothing you can do is right. Mm-hmm. And you might find yourself in that spot if you're not positioned to get new revenue. If your whole business is centered around DoD work, or at least a large portion of it. So that'd be my action step for today.
For sure, it's and you're talking about preparation, really.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a word that keeps coming up on all these podcasts, is be prepared, preparation. And you do have to be prepared. We won't talk specific timeline, but what I can tell you is the timeline that you look and laid out by the CFR rules. That's all nice and great and everything, but they did give themselves a little bit of wiggle room, mm-hmm. both to do a little early and to put some on some option years a little late. Mm-hmm. But what that doesn't say is that a prime using a subcontractor isn't going to want you to be certified before you have to be certified. So there's that. If so you got to keep that in mind and realize that if you want to, these primes might say if you want any new business, you have to be certified by X date.
Mm-hmm. That's where a lot of our customers come from. Is the bigger primes out there said, we have these contracts, we need you to be compliant.
Absolutely. And
we need you to test that you are. And so they're already doing that as early as 2017. So
yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, that's good. I mean, you just have to be prepared, and you have to understand that the dates you see and can suss out from from those rules and everything when the certifications are going to be start being required on contracts. That may come early, either because the government requires a little early on a contract or two, mm-hmm. or maybe more than that, but anyway, or because the primes say we want to be ready and we're going to require you to be certified sooner. So mm-hmm. The Cyber AB on I think the last town hall said that. We have no clue what the primes are going to say. They very well. If I was them, I'd want my subs to be certified ahead of time, so at least a portion of them, so we could move forward on these contracts and won't have to worry about it. So, anyway, preparation is the key word there.
We'll rename the podcast to CMMC Preparation. Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. So again, we're not trying to sit here and convince you of anything other than just take it seriously. So make your own choice at the end of the day.
Again, it's a freight train and it's coming.
Yeah.
Ain't stopping.
And it's coming slow, but it's coming. So they
yeah.
keep making it more and more real. So we're going to be at what's the conference name? I always get it wrong.
They call it SEEK.
SEEK
Conference East. SEEK East.
Yes.
This is what's called CEIC. CMMC Ecosystem Implementers Conference, I believe is what it stands for. We'll be there. I went to the one that was just CIC last year in San Diego. It was a great conference for implementers, for assessors, for DIB companies, for, I guess we're an implementer company, but anyway, so it was just a good broad spectrum conference. So if you get a chance to go, of course it's a little short notice, but it'll be a good conference. Mm-hmm. And it is November 21st and 22nd, I believe.
Yeah.
Pre-day, I think, is the 20th, on my birthday. So,
happy early birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good conference.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, if you're there, come see us. If not, we're gonna try. I don't know. We don't know what our schedule's gonna be, but we're gonna try and do a mid conference podcast where we're giving you our thoughts at the time of what's happening, and we'll try and get that posted. I have no idea if that's possible. And then for sure, though, we will do a podcast after the show and give you our actual organized thoughts. So
absolutely.
That should be one of the next 1 or 2 episodes. So check it out.
Definitely do it.
Yes, please subscribe. Also, please comment, text, email us any of your questions. We really want people to ask questions so that we don't have to go pay somebody. That's the whole point of this podcast, that we're here trying to give it away for free. So use it, abuse it, ask us. Thank you, guys.